everybody. Welcome. Today we have with us Jess Phoenix. Jess is the executive director and co-founder of the environmental scientific research organization Blueprint Earth. Since 2008, she's been a volcanologist, an extreme explorer, and a professional field scientist. She works with universities and major research institutions to study lava flows and natural hazards and perform climate research on glaciers and more. Jess is a fellow in the Explorers Club and the Royal Geographical Society, a featured scientist on the Discovery and Science channels, and her writing has appeared on websites such as BBC Online, Daily KO's Medium, as well as in Face the Current magazine and local print publications. She's delivered invited talks for TEDx, Mother Jones, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles, and the March for Science, and has led an Explorers Club flagged expedition. Host of the Catastrophe podcast, Jess was honored as a hometown hero by the Los Angeles Chargers for her work rescuing horses during California's deadly wildfires in 2018. Jess has just released a book detailing some of her experiences doing field research in volcanology and beyond. In Ms. Adventure, Jess Phoenix shares her extraordinary career and how the barriers she faced along the way inspired her to advocate for more diversity in science. She currently lives in Los Angeles with her husband, Carlos, their teenager, Kaz, and their 11 rescue pets. Welcome, Jess.
Hi. Oh,
Hey.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Lauren. And thanks, Google, for having me. This is awesome. And I'm excited to be here with you all virtually.
Yes, we are delighted to have you. So you can go ahead and share your presentation whenever you would like. While you're getting that set up, I'll let everybody know that we're going to go for about 20 minutes of Jess talking. We'll do some moderated Q&A, and then we're going to open it up for audience questions. So please add your questions to the YouTube feed as you have them. All right, Jess, on to you. Thanks so much.
Okay, so I'm just going to give everybody a little flavor for what my work is like. And obviously, if you've got questions, make a note because I will answer whatever you want me to at the end. So basically, my whole life philosophy in a nutshell is on this slide. Ignorance is the disease that we're all dealing with in this day and age, and the cure is curiosity itself. So just a little bit quick intro of who am I? And we've got somebody who does research by land, sometimes using horses, someone who also works underwater, which is a lot of fun, even if you're not super into the water, like I wasn't. And then, hey, sometimes I have to take helicopters and planes and all sorts of other in-the-air types of transportation. This is kind of the gist of being a field scientist, particularly when you work in remote and oftentimes dangerous locations, like, say, around volcanoes. So to start off with, this is a fairly stereotypical, like, hey, here's a volcano. This is actually Pu'u'o'o, which is a Hawaiian word, of course, and it is a parasitic cinder cone. It's not even the main volcano that is on the flanks of Kilauea volcano in Hawaii. And Pu'u'o'o, just to give you a sense of scale, I'll put my cursor on the screen here. Right in the center, in the foreground, you see some little silvery objects. And those silvery objects are about 6 feet tall each. They are monitoring equipment. And so this is a pretty massive opening into the earth, and it's not even the main one. So that's one of those things that oftentimes people always expect volcanoes to look this way. And I wanted to make sure that you all also know that this volcano is something that we see as well. This is Mauna Loa, which is the world's largest volcano. It may not look as impressive as the pointy inverted V shapes that we all draw and our kids draw when you ask them to draw a volcano. But this was actually given this name, shield volcano, from Hawaiian warrior shields laid on their side. So they're long, gradually sloping, and Mauna Loa is the world's largest. So from the bottom at the base in the seafloor, you know, five kilometers deep, basically, you are essentially from there to the top, almost 14,000 feet high. It's bigger than Mount Everest. So sense of scale here. It's a little tricky, and I can't even capture the full thing in one picture without a fisheye lens. This is another classic volcano, and you may think, wow, that would look like Mars, except for the fact that it has an atmosphere that we can see. This is Mauna Kea in Hawaii, and it's home to a bunch of telescopes, which I'm sure a lot of the science-oriented folks in the audience are very familiar with. But these are very small cinder cones, and I say very small. Each one in this picture is about 30 to 40 feet high. So compared to the immense bulk of Mauna Loa, they are just little itty bitty pimples on the face of the earth. Now here's your more stereotypical volcano. Just to get the juices flowing a little bit, because this volcano in the photo is erupting. This is El Reventador volcano in Ecuador, and its name in Spanish means the erupter. As you can see, it was happy to oblige with an eruption for this shot. Now, this volcano, when I worked there, was erupting about every 30 minutes. So not all eruptions are catastrophic and devastating. Obviously, we're primed to pay attention to the ones that threaten populated areas or are extremely large. But volcanoes erupt every single day. And right now, around the world, there are about 45 volcanoes erupting at this very moment. So it's not like volcanic eruptions are rare or unusual. It's just that they don't always occur in an area where we would hear about it, because it's really only if they impact us as humans that it makes the news. So you can find more info about this. I mean, obviously your Google, but the best place to go for information about the different eruptions that are occurring right now is the Smithsonian Global Volcanism Program. So if you look it up with the Smithsonian, you can get reports on what different volcanoes around the world are doing. So stay informed if you're into this stuff. Now, of course, volcanoes aren't just about the macro. We also have to go in and look at microscopic scale details. Now, this isn't quite truly microscopic, but this image, this is lava up close and in person. You've basically got about 6 inches across that lobe of lava, to give you an idea of the scale. And as you can see, it's incandescent. That reddish color is incandescence from the lava's heat, which at this point is about 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. So 4 times hotter than the hottest broil setting on most ovens. And it is incredible to be that close to something this powerful and this raw. And that's one of the things I love about what I do. Now, here's another up close view. And this is a side of lava that many people may not get a chance to ever experience unless you're lucky enough to go to a place like Hawaii that produces basaltic lavas, or Iceland also is in the news these days for doing something very similar. But this is basaltic lava. And this middle section, I'm going to put the cursor on the mid left portion of the screen and then slowly just drag it over to the right. This little bleb here, well, it's not really a bleb. This little, I guess, an iridescence, a pocket of iridescence is weathering of the lava. So basaltic lava in particular contains a lot of iron and magnesium, and those materials can oxidize when they're in contact with air. So this lava in this picture is just a few months old, and that beauty, that up close beauty, I mean, the whole iridescence pocket that I just outlined is only about the size of a quarter. So we're talking something very small scale that's produced by what is pretty often considered a violent act of Earth. So a little bit zoomed out. This is the fun part. I love flowing lava because we see shapes like this, which I've affectionately dubbed the lava man. And obviously this is like a Rorschach test, and lava flows you can't predict exactly where they're going to go or the forms that they will take. We have a pretty good idea, but prediction is not what we're in the business of in volcanology research. But we get to have moments of levity too. We also get to do incredible things like sample flowing lava. This is me. I am wearing in this photo nothing that is a synthetic material, all cotton. And then my boots are not steel-toed because my toes would be extremely injured by being so close to 2000 degree lava. I've got a heat-resistant balaclava and gloves on, and I'm using the geologist's favorite tool of the trade, a rock hammer, to sample what I like to refer to as the taffy from hell. And this lava that I'm taking a sample of, this is for science. This isn't just, oh, for fun, let's go stick a hammer in lava. This hammer is specialized so that it won't break, the head won't separate from the handle or anything like that. And I also am collecting the lava because I'm going to turn around and throw it into a coffee can, just a metal coffee can full of room temperature water to hyper quench the lava material, basically solidifying it and preserving the gas and minerals that are inside of the mix. From that information, we actually are able to understand what's going on inside the guts of the planet. So lava flows are a really good way that we can kind of check the pulse of different volcanoes and assess the hazards. That's the underlying fundamental purpose of volcanology. It's not just to get to go and do cool stuff. It's to keep people safe, ultimately, because, fun fact, 500 million people around the world live in the shadow of active volcanoes. 500 million with a B. And that means that volcanic hazard areas are pretty populated. So we need to do everything we can to understand eruptions and the threats that they pose. Now, another really nice zoomed in view of something else volcanoes produce. Again, there's beauty in the details. Here we've got, this is sulfur. So these are two little vents, essentially, that come from an area that's volcanically active. They're called fumaroles, and they produce volcanic gases. They're outlets for those gases to escape through parts of the Earth's crust, the uppermost crust right under our feet. And fumaroles oftentimes produce a lot of sulfur. So what you're looking at here is sulfur crystals forming. They're basically crystallizing as the warm gases are released from the magma chamber in a slower way than a violent eruption. And they're beautiful. So I figured you all would appreciate the beauty that we see with the brutality of volcanoes. It's always a nice juxtaposition. And this is what we do to use the gas to learn about what's going on inside the magma chamber beneath. Here I am using what is basically a bicycle pump and a piece of flexible plastic tubing. And in my left hand, which unfortunately you can't see in this image, I've got a glass bottle that's an evacuated glass bottle, meaning it doesn't have just regular atmospheric gases. It's got a specialized gas inside. I have got the tubing inserted into a fumarole, and I'm sucking volcanic gases into that bottle so I can close it off and take it back to the lab and run it through a gas chromatograph. And I can see what the composition of the gases is. And then that also tells us, are we building up to a more explosive eruptive event? Or is this volcano likely to just sort of simmer along as it has been? So we get a lot of different information depending on what part of the volcano we're listening to. Are we analyzing earthquake data? Are we looking at whether the ground is deformed? You know, is there magma being injected underground, or is the magma draining away? We can tell that by oftentimes millimeter scale movements of the surface of the Earth. So we use some pretty precise monitoring techniques, as well as good old fashioned, let's get a rock hammer and crack open this lava. It's fun. There's a variety of things that we do, and they're all important, except for what I'm doing in this picture, which is literally poking lava with a stick. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like my generation, that weird micro generation between like Gen X and millennial. And so we have this odd sense of humor. So I just told my friends that when I got to do my first work around lava, I would poke it with a stick for science. And as you can see in the image, this is like 2008. So obviously not the most clear of photos, but the stick has caught on fire. So if anyone was wondering what science says happens to the sticks when you poke them into lava, now you know. All right, a little bit more serious here. So this is a volcanic crater at the summit of what to me is one of the most interesting volcanoes on Earth. This one is called Kawah Ijen, and it's on the east end of the island of Java in Indonesia. Its name means the lonely one in Javanese. And you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a lot of gases. Pretty strong indicator we've got some volcanic activity. And you see the yellow color again. Sulfur is a recurring theme here. In the foreground, though, you can see that there's a lake, and that lake is a bright turquoise, but it's murky. It's not like the clear turquoise you get of tropical waters. This is water you do not want to touch. And that's because this is the world's largest acid lake. It is insanely beautiful. And it is a place where, I mean, it's just utterly breathtaking to see this in person, because I measured the acidity of the lake. And the day that I was there, it was measuring 0.24 pH. So battery acid measures a 1 on the pH scale, and 7 is normal water. And so we've got something that is 4 times stronger than battery acid, just sitting there in a lake that happens to be in the summit crater of a 9,000-foot high volcano. So you can imagine this is an important place for scientists to study, because if there's a major eruption, that acid is going to basically pour out of the volcano and go down onto the farms and villages beneath. So it's really critical that we monitor volcanoes, and the threats aren't always what we think they might be. Here I am, same volcano, but with something else to consider. You can see the acid lake a little bit better in this photo. I'm wearing a respirator because of those acid gases. We've got hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide. That's a long way of saying they're acid gases. They are bad for your lungs. Don't breathe them in, especially not for an extended period of time. And then in the back here, kind of the back of the lake to the right side of the screen, you can see there is a yellowish rounded kind of thing floating on the surface of the water. It looks like a mat, and that's because it is. It's a microbial mat. So there are living organisms that are known as extremophiles in science, meaning organisms that can survive in extreme environments like extreme cold or heat or the vacuum of space or high pressure or in acid. So we have conditions here at this volcano and in other volcanoes around the world that we're starting to study in a more interdisciplinary way. These conditions may have been similar to the conditions in which life originated on Earth. So that is another interesting aspect of volcanology. We have these really harsh, really extreme environments that can give us a lot of insight about how the planet has changed and evolved, and what sort of organisms we may be encountering as we explore off-planet as well. Okay, now this is a video. I want you all to see this because it looks like blue lava from that still image. I'm sure people are going, oh my God, is it really that color? It's not lava, and yes, it's blue. So I'm going to play the video, and I'll explain what it is. There's a little bit of audio. You can just hear the burning noise, and you can hear my commentary, but I'm wearing a respirator in it, so it may not be the clearest. So you probably heard that, I hope, maybe if you had your volume up, but essentially I was 20 feet shooting that video. I was 20 feet away from this, what looks like blue lava. It is not lava. This is sulfur, almost pure native sulfur that is being erupted from the ground there at Kawa Ijen. This is obviously nighttime, but when sulfur makes contact with oxygen, you have a combustion process and sulfur burns blue. So it's just absolutely stunning. I didn't manipulate the video in any way. That is what it looks like. And you can go to Java. You can visit this area. Just make note that it's hazardous. And there are local folks who will guide people down so they can see the blue fire. But it is utterly spectacular. And I highly recommend it. I also recommend, if you do go, definitely tip the Indonesians who guide you very well, because they previously only made money from mining that sulfur in those hazardous acidic conditions. And their life expectancies of those miners were abysmal. So tourism, responsible tourism, is one way that we can actually help local communities do better than what they've had access to in the past. And these miners make way more money from helping tourists than they did from mining the sulfur. And it was used in cosmetics, because I always get that question. Why would anyone mine sulfur? It's used in cosmetics as well as a few other applications, but that seems to be the most common. So that's Kawa-i-Jen. We're going back to Ecuador now. And this is just a little bit of a sort of like what has happened to my career as somebody who I was blogging about my work on volcanoes starting back in 2008, when I was just a volunteer researcher at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. A lot of people picked up on those blogs I did, and they started to call me for TV shows and things. And I agreed to this one at El Reventador, and it was really awful. In my book, I write about my first ever TV experience, because on the left of this, you've got me. And then in the center, there's a Navy SEAL named Sean Kylan. And on the right is the other guy who was on screen with us. His name is Jeff Johnson. And Jeff Johnson's a volcano geophysicist at Boise State in Idaho. So you have two real scientists and a Navy SEAL. But then you have the Hollywood producer mindset of scientists are helpless and don't know how to work in the field, and we need the Navy SEAL to protect us. Well, Jeff runs Ironmans and had worked on El Reventador like 10 times already when we went down there for that filming. And I have obviously worked on plenty of volcanoes in my own right, and we definitely don't need anybody to protect us. But of course, that is why I keep doing media. Because one, look at the camera guy's face. He is just absolutely blown away by the fact that there's a volcano erupting less than 2 miles from us, and we're just going about business, which it erupted every 30 minutes. You got kind of used to it. And these were smaller eruptions. So it's not without risk, of course. But we, Jeff and I, being professional volcanologists and volcano geophysicists, we can understand and assess the risks and make a decision about if what we're there to do is worth the risk. So I want people to understand that science includes field science. And that is why I do a lot of the public outreach work that I do. And I also want to increase access and representation in field science in the media. As you can see in that picture, everybody is white. And that is not what the face of science is changing to be. Especially in geology, it's been largely white male dominated, and that is shifting. So again, me being there, I tick a few boxes, but the fields that we are seeing, like the change in geology as a field, is it really is skewing more heavily female and more heavily towards people of color, which is great because science exists all around the world, especially with volcanoes. I mean, local scientist expertise is always going to be better than having, a team from the US parachuting in to try to save the day. That's not how it works. So we have to be able to show local communities. And this was a shoot I did with the Science Channel for their show, What on Earth? I do a lot for them, but this was in Tanzania, and that mountain in the background is the volcano Oldonyo Lengai, which means the mountain of God in the Maasai language. It is sacred to the Maasai people. So on this shoot, I asked the production team if we could ask permission from the Maasai elder, as you're supposed to do, before we go up and film on the volcano. But I wanted to show that on screen. I wanted to show the Maasai elder, and I wanted to show that it's important to be respectful of local peoples and, get their permission before doing science, especially doing, TV science on their land. And that's something that I'm encouraged by, because the networks are being much more open to that and to showing the people who are local to these areas. I do have a show coming out that we'll see how it goes. I'm excited for people to see it, but of course, I'm not a producer on it, so I don't know how it gets represented. The show is called Hunting Atlantis. I'm not saying that I believe that Atlantis is a real thing, as a whole legend. What I do in this show is my colleague, Stel Pavlo, who's there in the boat on that picture. Stel has loved Atlantis lore forever. He's a historian. And he basically said, I have a new hypothesis that if Atlantis existed in any kind of a real capacity to give rise to the myth that Plato popularized, then we're looking in the wrong era. that research done to the origins of an Atlantis myth previously was done too recently. We needed to look further back in history. So my job on this show was to basically, I have expertise in natural disasters. And a part of the Atlantis myth is that Atlantis was destroyed in a day and a night. Now, we all know Plato lied all the time. The guy was a serial liar, and he loved a good story. So I went into this show saying, like, is it okay when I tell you guys that I think whatever your hypothesis is, if I think it's garbage, I can say that? And they said yes. So I'm basically the skeptic of the show and the person who does the extreme investigations into like basically sinkholes and undersea and looking at faults for potential earthquake sources, and we go with local scientists who've actually been researching the different ancient cultures that we get a window into. So I think it'll be good, but it's TV, and one thing I've learned as a scientist doing TV is that unless you're a producer, good luck. So I'm crossing my fingers, but I'm still trying because I want people to understand that science is ongoing, exploration, field science is ongoing, and there's still plenty of roles for people to play in learning more about our world and both our past and our future. And that's another reason why. So in this photo, I'm holding the Explorers Club flag with my husband, Carlos. The Explorers Club also used to be sort of an old white guys club. And, we was basically very colonial, very imperial, and was a counterpart to the Royal Geographical Society. They didn't even start admitting women in the Explorers Club until the 1980s at the urging of Carl Sagan. And so nowadays we have people in the club who are, the astronauts who went to the moon. We have people who went to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the summit of Everest, and folks like Jane Goodall and Sally Ride and Sylvia Earle. So it's pretty much a club now that is not into the colonialism or imperialism of the past, but is all about promoting exploration in the name of science, but ethical exploration. So Carlos and we're both part of it because we founded a nonprofit organization that we basically said, we're doing this research and we want to get students exposure to field exploration. So that's why Carlos joined, even though he's a cybersecurity guy. It's funny how you get sucked into science if you're in my orbit. I rope everyone in. And then also just one other thing for everybody to know about me. If you didn't search for me before the talk, or you just stumbled in here by accident, I did run for US Congress, and I did so with a mohawk. And, I refuse to play by the normal rules of engagement for politics, because running an ethical and science and evidence-based campaign and having a policy platform that encourages science to have a seat at the table was what mattered to me. And so I got these pictures were both taken over the weekend of the Explorers Club annual dinner. And the photographer on the picture on the left said, "I got an American flag for you because I'm so excited you're running for Congress. Here, let's take a picture." And on the right, I just happened to be walking by the Fearless Girl statue. And this was right after I had decided I was running for Congress. And my husband, Carlos, said, "Oh, get in there. I'll take a picture." And so I said, well, I don't know what's coming in the future. I just know that we have these global challenges, and it's going to take scientists to help engage the world in ways that will solve the problems of this century and beyond. So this was a campaign poster one of my supporters made for me when I ran for Congress. And it kicked off a whole series of posters where he did like the Uncle Sam style, but for scientists like Carl Sagan and et cetera. And then on the right, you've got my book, which came out in March. It is Misadventure. And that is an intentional pun because most of my field adventures involve ridiculous things like falling in a sewer before going to spend a month right near Machu Picchu researching climate change in Peru. So, you have these misadventures. And then I was kind of like, well, all the exploration books that people talk about, whether they're fictitious or real, they're all by guys. And I said, hey, wait a minute. Like, there are women in field science too. There are non-binary and trans people in field science. Like and there are plenty of people who have disabilities and, who have varying ethnic or cultural or religious backgrounds. And hey, we got to crack the door open somehow. So this is the last 2 slides here I have for you. One is about my nonprofit, and so is the second one. But this one shows where we work in California's Mojave Desert. Now, the organization is called Blueprint Earth, and I'll explain that in a second. But here you can see 2 of our student researchers who are basically cataloging using survey techniques that are popular in plant biology. They are cataloging the plants in this area. And in the background, you see some cinder cones that haven't erupted in about 10,000 years, but there are still volcanoes there. But with Blueprint Earth, you can see here some of our students doing field research and then, of course, posing for the camera. But we basically try to bring field science experience to students at no cost. And we do that via individual grants and donations. And we've had some medium-sized grants, but we're at the point where we need to catalog the planet, essentially. And the Mojave is our first area, but we want to create blueprints of Earth's 7 major biomes. And when I say blueprint, I mean, like, you can't build a house if you don't know the schematics for the plumbing and, the wall construction and, of course, the electrical systems. Like, these are all things you need to understand and how they all work together. We're doing the same thing with geology, biology, hydrology, atmospheric sciences, ecology, engineering. And the end goal is to replicate this super detailed geo-referenced data set that we're collecting. We want to duplicate that in a controlled setting. So like a desert in a box, or if you imagine like an IKEA warehouse sized desert, we're not going to be putting like bighorn sheep in this thing, but we can simulate bighorn sheep urine and feces and their effects on a flowing spring, which is what we have in the Mojave Desert. And we want to increasingly tackle more biodiverse areas as we get better at our process. So if any folks listening are interested in either doing field science or helping with data analysis or helping us get more funding, please, by all means, reach out. And, this is the future of science. It's collaborative, it's interdisciplinary, it's bold, it's dirty, it's brilliant. So I really appreciate that you all invited me here. Hopefully you had a little bit of fun with the volcanoes, and that's it. Keep being curious, because that's what we need.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. I love how your slide was just all these amazing visuals, which really complement the stories in your book where you describe the geology in like Hemingway level details, but having the visuals, like there's nothing that compares to like, the sulfur burning or that beautiful oxidization patterns. Before we get to the audience questions, I have a few of my own, kind of starting with your background a little bit. I know that you were originally an English major and then you switched to history and you graduated with a history major from Smith College. You also have an MFA. So what inspired you to go into volcanology?
It was the very first geology class that I took, and I took it after I almost failed out of college. I almost failed out of Smith. I know now that I was depressed, like I actually had full-blown depression, but at the time I was in the still in that like late 90s, early 2000s mindset of like, play through the pain, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you'll be fine. So it wasn't normal to not go to class and to sleep all day and to barely eat or shower for an entire semester. But fortunately, a kind academic dean gave me a retroactive medical withdrawal. That was absolutely amazing. But the caveat was that I had to go and take classes at another school before Smith would let me back in. So I went to UMass Amherst, which was down the road, just for a semester. And I took classes that I thought, look, I have to motivate myself. Like this is my second chance. I have to make the most of it. And so I signed up for like poetry and the history of North American Native peoples and a drawing class. And then I took intro geology. And I could not believe that geology had answers to things like, why are mountain ranges where they are? How do volcanoes work? And I fell in love with it. I didn't have time to change majors before I graduated. So it was a few years later. I had taken a field class and I knew that I loved it, but I thought it'll be way too hard to get a second bachelor's degree. And that's going to be so much time. But then I realized that the Cal State schools have a master's program makeup like track where basically you can have a bachelor's in anything and then go get a master's in something completely different. And you'll just take the undergraduate courses you're missing, like for me, physics. You take that while you're also doing graduate work. And I just happened to apply for an internship at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory thinking they'll never pick me. I just started doing geology. I'm a master's student without an undergraduate degree in this. No, they picked me. And the first time I set foot on a volcano was Mauna Loa. And it like basically knocked the wind out of me with its grandeur and its beauty and the raw force that volcanoes contain. And the first time I saw flowing lava, it was like, that's it, done. Best thing on planet Earth. This is what I need to do forever and ever and ever. So long story short, it was because I messed up and that I had a whole different path open to me. And, it's a little bit of luck, a lot of chance, and also just continuing to show up, even when it was hard, even when, it would have been easier to just be like, nah, whatever. It was me going, okay, I got to go back to school. I got to make this work. And, we all have that ability. There's nothing special about me that made me able to do this that anybody listening, doesn't have. You all have that ability.
So, okay, you were one of the few people from Colorado who had never actually been camping when they left the state. But I know that you were a little uncomfortable with the field aspect at first. So then what actually convinced you, or what are some of the key aspects of your experience that convinced you to kind of work through that discomfort and continue to pursue science? So it wasn't, just like oh gosh, sleeping under the stars. What is this?
Yeah. As you said, like my parents they're very athletic people, but they weren't outdoorsy, and camping just never was a thing. I mean, I lived in the foothills of the Rockies in Littleton, but it was just like, oh no, I go play sports. Like I don't do camping. Camping is for other people. And, it was hard. Like I had this whole complex, like, how do you go to the bathroom outside? I discuss it in the book. So if you've ever felt self-conscious about this stuff, you're not the only one. But really it was just, look, I still don't love it. Like, I don't like pooing outdoors. It's not comfortable, okay? But how, you tell yourself, look, like literally billions of people throughout history have done this. I think I can manage it. And the goal is what's worth it. Like the end goal of going to these places, because I'm privileged enough to be able to go and do this work, I have an obligation to get through whatever discomforts may arise and say, like, look, this is my own hang up. There is something way bigger at stake here. And, there's research that needs to be done. There's data we need to collect. There are people I need to go back and tell this stuff to, because they'll never have the chance to do it. So I take my privilege as an obligation. And that's why I push myself when I run into obstacles, whether they're of my own creation or, whether life throws them in my path, because I've been given a lot. So I owe the world a lot. I mean, that's how I look at it.
So you've definitely had more experiences than you could possibly share in one book. You and I have talked about them many times. Can you share one of your favorite field stories that's not in the book?
Okay, well, this is something that was referenced in the like a lot of the pitches to me giving talks. And I think this one about fixing a tire on the side of the world's largest volcano.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
Okay, well then I'm
covered.
adding it. Okay, well, all right. So you do field fixes when you're doing field research. And, a quick example is when we were filming in Tanzania, the boom mic broke. And a boom mic is a pole with a long microphone attached to the end of it. And it has to, the pole has to support the microphone. And the boom mic broke. It was dangling. And we had to go film the scene with the Maasai elder. And I looked around, and we're in a Maasai camp, and it's like, oh, there's a bone. Do you have gaff tape? So we basically gaff taped a femur of a goat to this boom mic to make a support for it so that we could continue using it. And that's kind of what happened with the tire change on the side of the world's largest volcano. We're driving up to do some climate research on Mauna Loa in a really remote area. Like we had to go off-roading for a while. There's no cell service on that part of the island. So even though we're in Hawaii, like if something happens, we have to hike out. That's just it. And we started the car started to act weirdly. And then we heard a noise when we slowed down, and we're like, that sounds like tire air escaping. Like that sounds like the tire is leaking. We look out and we're like, oh my God, there's a cut in the sidewall that was about an inch long. And we were like, Oh, geez. So what we ended up doing was shoving a ballpoint pen into the hole. So, I mean, it was like that was the cut, but the actual air escape area was about the size of the pen. And I have a picture of this pen stabbed into the sidewall of the tire. And then we kind of said, okay, what can we seal it with? Because we can't drive it with a pen sticking out of the tire on a road that's made of lava, cooled lava, but lava nonetheless. And so we said, oh, does anybody have gum? And yep, somebody had gum. We chewed the gum. We pulled out the pen, shoved the gum in the hole, and then took a bunch of duct tape and covered the whole thing. And it held. So that's a field fix. And they come up all the time. And it's that creative problem solving. That's what defines, I think, scientists and engineers of all sorts. I mean, we run into a wall and we don't go, oh, I give up. We say, okay, how can I tunnel under this or vault over it or go around it or build a window or, you never run out of creative solutions. And that is an essential quality for field researchers to have. And you've done field research. I'm sure you understand how that works.
Yes. So then what scientific or exploration achievement are you the most proud of? Not just exploits, but actual achievements.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because, my career's been a little bit different. It's not like I discovered the cure for cancer or something, right? Like the science I've done hasn't been spectacular in and of itself. I mean, my master's thesis was on undersea lava flows on the next Hawaiian island. And I basically just defined a couple new types of undersea lava flows. It's neat. It's interesting. We need the information, but it's not like I saved a life with that. I would say the thing I'm most proud of is sort of a general achievement, which is basically just getting more people excited about the possibilities in science and that science is for them. Like I have people who say, you made me believe that I can do this. And it really blows my mind when I get people coming up to me, which happens actually a lot. The first time it happened, I almost cried. But like kids, younger kids, whether they're like little kids or teenagers, they'll come up to me and they'll say like, you just inspired me. You told me that I could be a volcanologist, that I could be an astronaut, that I could be an engineer. And I'm like, yeah. And to me, I'm like, well, of course you can. But that's a message people need to hear. And so it's just, I guess, by accident, being somebody that can show that science is for everyone and that you can have tattoos and be a good scientist. You can run for Congress and still be a good scientist. You can even go on TV and do actual science. It's hard, but I try. And I think every time I want to give up because people are like, scientists shouldn't be on TV. Scientists shouldn't talk about politics. How on earth could you do, popular shows on Atlantis? And I'm like, I'm getting people excited about science and I'm encouraging them to explore and to discover about the world around us in a scientific way. And we need more of that now.
So then for people who want to get started in scientific research and exploration, who, maybe they're already in the middle of their first careers or second careers, how do people get started? Do you have to start from college or is it possible to go into science switching careers?
I would say if you want to get a taste for what happens in whatever scientific field you're interested in, and you can't drop everything and, go on in a completely different direction, look at local colleges and universities, including community colleges, and see what the specializations are of the scientists who are working at those schools. And a lot of times you could come in and watch what they do in a lab. You may be able to go and assist on field research. You can say, look, I'll carry the bags. If you can train me to help, I'll help. Or you can work with nonprofit research organizations. I mean, there are so many around the country and around the world that need volunteer researchers who can be trained. So if you can demonstrate that you bring something to the table, whether that's like data analysis abilities or communication skills or graphic skills, whatever, these things are all valuable because for a long time, scientists have been told to shut up and stay in the corner and just do the research. So oftentimes scientists don't have like a broader skill set. Some of them do, but not all of us do. And so there are many different ways where you can get into researching something that matters to you. And hey, if you want, come out and do research with Blueprint Earth. We ask for if people are not students, if they're more established people and more established in their career, if you want to come out and do research with us, donate $100, and that covers the cost for 2 of our students to participate, so that we can bring 2 students out to the field. So there you can get your hands dirty with geology or biology, hydro, atmosphere, etc. And you're helping us do valuable data collection, and you're covering some of our costs for our students. So there are so many opportunities. And if you're curious, look up whoever's near you and start with them.
And speaking of Blueprint Earth, which has been studying the geology, biology, hydrology, and atmospheric conditions of the Mojave Desert for years now, what is one of the most interesting things your team has found through that field?
Oh my goodness. This is going to be the uber nerd moment of the conversation. So we actually have seen some interesting correlations. We're not entirely sure this is what we need to pull out from the data analysis, but we find that certain organisms, like, for example, toads, we have toads that live in the Flowing Spring area of our study site. Some of these toads occur, they occur sporadically throughout the stream area, but they only occur where a certain plant species occurs. And so we have a few different things like that, where we find like potentially a relationship between a creature or an organism and something else in the environment. And it's just extremely exciting. But I will say we have like over 6,000 unique geo-referenced observations with photos and data associated with them. So building a giant relational database is what we're already in the process of doing it, but that's what's going to kind of highlight those relationships. And the fact that they do exist and we can see them on like a micro scale. I mean, we have microclimates we've been documenting using data loggers in this area, and we can see the changes over time, even just from when we started 8 years ago to where we are now. We've noticed that there's been a shift in average temperatures and average, humidity levels versus when we started. So we're basically, this is one of those studies that doesn't ask like a big question. It tries to say what is out there and how does it work. And so we're making progress, and it's just really exciting. And I want to see if these toads are connected to this plant, because I think they might be, but obviously it's a hypothesis. We got to test it.
Awesome. Well, I think we do have a few audience questions if we want to kind of roll those into the conversation. All right. So we have a question from Arjun. Where is the best place in the world to see lava live today?
You are totally in luck, because there are 2 really good locations, not including lava lakes, which are also a good place to see lava. If you want to see flowing lava, you got to go to Iceland, because there's an eruption at Fagradalsfjall going on right now. And so that's near the major airport, the international airport in Iceland there. And you basically, you can go and just look at it. You can sit there all day and just watch the lava flow, watch the eruption going on. And you can also go down to Pacaya volcano in Guatemala. It frequently has lava eruptions, and not all eruptions are lava. So that's something to point out. But you can go. Pacaya isn't super monitored in terms of like the government telling you what you can and can't do. They're a little bit more lenient there. So be careful if you do go there, because lava can be deadly, and there can be other things like lava bombs or pyroclastic flows, like things that appear very quickly and without much warning. That means that you got to be extra careful. I would recommend going with somebody local who knows the area if you do go to Pacaya. If you want to see a lava lake, the best place to see roiling, hellscape lava is basically in Nicaragua at Masaya volcano. And you can drive up. There's a parking lot right at the edge of the crater. You look in and it's like, oh, big old lava lake. And it's really incredible to see. So and that's a great one for people to see if you've got limited mobility, or if you're with someone who does, because it's right there.
Nice. Another question from the audience. All right. From Plymouth. Great talk. Thanks. You just touched briefly on your run for Congress, which is how I first heard of you. Wondering if you have any thoughts based on that, how to get more scientists into politics.
Fantastic question. Thank you for asking. I think that the biggest thing we can do to get not just scientists, but obviously scientists are my bread and butter here. That's who I speak to mainly. But anybody who isn't like a traditional background sort of political person, the best way to do that is by getting big money out of politics and publicly funding elections. The cost is the problem for a lot of people. I was only able to run because my husband works for a cybersecurity company and earns enough so that my missing income for the 18 months I ran wasn't that big of a deal. A lot of people are not that fortunate. And particularly in science, it's not like we get paid the big bucks typically. So especially if you're like a postdoc or, a PhD student, good luck. So we really need to advocate, all of us, even if you're not interested in going into politics yourself, but we need to advocate at the local level, which will then go upwards to, basically publicly funding elections. And this is something that other countries do with great success. And that will level the playing field a bit so that people who are nurses and janitors and, sanitation workers or scientists or, PTA leaders, they can go run for Congress. And it won't just have to be, Ivy educated lawyers, which is what we see most of in Congress.
All right. So I'm going to follow on to that. How do you respond to people who excuse our current climate change and carbon emissions by citing the amount of carbon dioxide emitted from volcanic eruptions rather than attributable to human activities?
Well, I tell them that we have a very good handle on volcanic CO2 emissions, and less than 1% of all CO2 emissions globally per year are from volcanoes. Humans produce more than 99% of the global CO2 emissions. So volcanoes also, the double whammy here is that volcanoes also have a cooling effect when they produce large eruptions. So we're talking like a Yellowstone size eruption or a Toba or a Tambora or a Nat Krakatau. Or actually in this case, it was just Krakatau. A Nat Krakatau is the new one. But those volcanoes have produced a global cooling effect for about a year or two because they're insulating the planet from the solar radiation, the solar heat, by basically blanketing the planet with particulate matter, acid aerosols and particulates. And that blanket cools things down briefly. So volcanoes are not adding to any kind of climate change. Volcanoes are one of the few things that are they're just existing. They're not really having a tangible impact on what the planet's doing in that regard.
So given that geologists tend to view time in very long durations and human civilization is only a more recent development, and the rapid acceleration of environmental changes that are happening during human civilization, can you share ways in which you are hopeful about the future of planet Earth?
I have to say, so when I ran for Congress and the work that I do, speaking in schools and to kids, oh my gosh, kids are amazing. Like my husband Carlos and I we're in the process of adopting a teenager from the foster care system. And that just reaffirms it for us. Like these kids are by and large so empathetic. And that empathy is something that has been missing from a lot of conversations, especially like my generation. It wasn't like, oh, empathy, we need to teach that. And now I think kids are much more aware of the importance of how, mental health, environmental health, civic health, that is all connected, and that we are in a connected global society. And the pandemic really has highlighted that. So I think that the thing that gives me hope is not just our ability to engineer our way out of problems, which we're pretty good at. I mean, we were able to right the circumstances when the Dust Bowl happened back in the US in the 30s and 40s. So we are capable of this, but we have a couple generations coming up through the ranks who genuinely want to make the world a better place for not just themselves, but for each other. And so they encourage me, they give me hope. And that's why I keep doing TV, even though it's a pain, why I keep doing Blueprint Earth, although we paused our field work because of COVID, but we're starting again in the fall. And we've been doing the data analysis the whole time because these are these huge picture questions and we can't leave the planet a mess for the younger folks. Like we got to do what we can now to make a difference.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have a couple more audience questions. We want to pull one up here. Okay, from Arjun. Have you ever thrown anything into lava just to watch it disappear?
Yes, and also by accident. I was walking alongside a flowing river of lava, which was burning its way through a little forested patch. And those forested patches are called kipukas, which is a Hawaiian word. It's an island amidst a sea of lava. And I was walking in this forest trying to like push my way through the underbrush. This was right after that picture of me poking the lava with a stick. This was like immediately after. And I think this was Pele poking me back, the Hawaiian volcano goddess going, you shouldn't poke me with a stick, because I turned a corner and my favorite pocket knife fell out into the lava. And I had a moment where I'm like, oh no. And I start reaching for it. And then I'm like, oh God, no. And oh yeah, I stopped real quick, because something that's 2000 degrees, like you're going to stop. You're not going to stick your hand into it. Thank goodness. But I had to watch the pocket knife just get like subsumed by the lava. And that is what happens. I mean, there is nothing that is going to stop that from occurring. Like just let it go.
All right. Another question from the audience. All right. From Roberto. Thanks for your talk. I read a headline about a super volcano that might cause another mass extinction soon. Is this just clickbait, or do you believe something like this might happen soon?
So those volcano stories, like I even get suggested them on my phone. Thanks, Google. But it's like Yellowstone, blah, blah, blah. Like we're all going to die. There's a super volcano under New England. No. So those are clickbait. It can be hard to tell, because yes, Yellowstone has erupted so catastrophically in the past, and it's easy to spin this stuff and it gets clicks. Like it's fear mongering, which a lot of our political news is lately, but we also see it with natural disasters, and they'll say, oh, Yellowstone's overdue, or, name the volcano overdue. Well, newsflash, volcanoes don't operate on human schedules, and they don't keep calendars. They have no idea if they're overdue or not. They erupt when there's too much pressure in the system and it has to go somewhere. So the odds of a super volcano producing an eruption large enough to cause a mass extinction in our lifetimes, like you are better off playing Powerball. You'd be more likely to win Powerball tomorrow than you are to have that happen in our lifetimes. This real hazards that we should be worried about, there are plenty of them. And the biggest one in the US is Mount Rainier. That's the one that concerns me, not because of the potential volume of the eruption, but because there are glaciers on top of Mount Rainier, over 30 of them. And when those glaciers heat up really rapidly, like say during an eruption, they melt. And that meltwater goes racing down the sides of the volcano and forms mud flows called lahars. And South Seattle and Tacoma were built on these ancient Rainier mud flows. And they're 100 feet thick. So basically, Rainier is something that we monitor very, very well. The USGS monitors the hell out of volcanoes, especially the ones near any populated areas or near flight paths. So we have Yellowstone super well monitored, and other countries have followed suit. They've made big investments into monitoring volcanoes that could threaten populations. So you will hear about it from credible scientists and from people at the USGS. People like me, you will hear us talking about any kind of potential eruption that's truly a hazard before it happens. Like you'll hear about it in advance, because we want to keep people safe.
Nice. All right. I think we've got time. I'm going to ask you one last question. What are you planning next? What are your upcoming expeditions that you're thinking about?
Okay. I'm really excited you asked that, because I have the coolest expedition ever that I am desperate to go do, and I have to wrangle funding for it. But basically, I have put together like the Avengers of science, really, really amazing scientists who do volcano geophysics and ecological studies of microbes and in extreme environments, marine biologists, like to go and investigate the world's newest discovered lava lake. We confirmed it only via satellite. It's a place called Mount Michael. It's on Saunders Island, which is 2 degrees north of the Antarctic Circle, 1,000 miles to the east of the bottom tip of Argentina. It is literally the middle of nowhere. And on this tiny volcanic island, which is literally just made up of the volcano, there's nothing but penguins. And a lava lake at the summit that no human has ever laid eyes on. And I say ever because it is such a harsh environment. There are glaciers and crevasses, and you've got volcanic gases churning out of it. And even via satellite, we've only been able to do thermal imaging. So even our satellites haven't seen this lava lake. We just know it's there because of the gas and because of the temperature readings. So I'm trying to get this expedition together to go to basically the end of the world to show people that science and exploration are still happening. So that is going to be a whole big effort, and we need to raise funds and we need talented people to support it. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Well, awesome. Well, it has been such a pleasure catching up, and thank you so much for, sharing your awesome work with our audience. Just to one last plug, you can see the links in the YouTube channel for Misadventure, which is Jess's book that was released in March. Also, Blueprint Earth, the nonprofit organization that is studying and cataloging the environments of different ecosystems. Obviously, Jess has a show coming up, Hunting Atlantis on Discovery. And let's hope that she can pull off this new expedition to the unexplored lava lake. Jess, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lauren. And thanks everybody at Google. This was really fun.